Exodus, he told me that we're in Exodus chapter 9 today. You, as of this moment, we've been through 4 plagues already. We've seen the flies, we've seen the gnats, we've seen, what else have we seen in these plagues? The frogs, I hate the frogs. And the blood. The frogs were the worst one, I think, because of the smell of them. They said the stench was so bad, they had them all up in a pile, and it was very smelly. I couldn't imagine. Does anybody like frogs in here? Nobody? Everybody has amphibian phobia? I like frogs a little bit, just a little bit. Not in their case. They were everywhere, in the food, in their houses. I think every step you took, you could probably feel a little, you know. Let me stop playing. Okay, so we're in Exodus chapter 9 today. I think he told you last week that there was the 10 plagues, 10 gods thingy. So here's a QR code if you want to scan it and get the PDF that he was talking about. We'll leave that up for a second. Now, I was looking at it, and there's a few differences in some of the gods. If you can't scan the QR code, I can get you the PDF. You can come to me after church. I can text you the link. But yeah, here it is right here if you want to scan that. So yeah, I was looking at it. Some of them, you know, Egypt had a lot of gods. They had a lot of different types of gods. There were some that were actually, you know, have different meanings. Some of them meant the same thing but were different. Everybody was everybody's parent. Set's parents were Osiris. Horus was Hathor's mama. Hathor was Horus's mother, but at the same time they were in love and crazy stuff like that in those gods. So I thank God that we serve Yahweh. That's all I'm going to say about that. But, all right, let's get right into the scripture. It says, "Then the Lord said unto Moses, Go in unto Pharaoh and tell him, Thus saith the Lord, God of the Hebrews, Let my people go, that they may serve me. For if thou refuse to let them go, and wilt hold them still, behold, the land of the Lord is upon thy cattle, which is in the field, upon thy horses, upon thy donkeys, upon thy camels, upon the oxen, and upon the sheep. There shall be a very grievous," okay, I'm using King James Version today, but there should be a very grievous murrain. "And the Lord said, and the Lord shall sever between the cattle of Israel and the cattle of Egypt, and there shall nothing die, all that is of the children of Israel. And the Lord appointed a set time, saying, Tomorrow the Lord shall do this thing in the land. And the Lord did that thing on the morrow, and all the cattle of Egypt died, but the cattle of the children of Israel did not die, not one. And Pharaoh sent, and behold, there was not one of the cattle of the Israelites dead. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go." So, y'all can look at that. That's Hathor, the goddess of the sky, but she's represented by a cow, as you can see. And, you know, she represents a few different things. She represents the sky. She represents, I think it's fertility. She represents life. And then because they used to have drunken orgies in her temple for her birthday at the new year, she also represents love in certain places. And so by God killing all the cattle, he's really killing off, proving that he's stronger than Hathor is in Egypt's eyes. Because God said back in, I think it's Exodus chapter 3, that he's going to do all these wonders so that Egypt will know that he is the one true living God. That's what he says, and I believe it's Exodus chapter 3 when he's talking to Moses, and Moses is trying to run away from responsibility. That's what he says at first. So yeah, Exodus chapter 3, he says that. And then here's another, this is a more modern day picture of Hathor, of how people see her now, really. As you can see, she's also the mother of Horus. They say that Ra, the sun god, used to go in her mouth every night and then come out in the morning and rise in the east. It's a lot of interesting things about her. Let me go to the next slide so you can see. So yeah, Hathor was often portrayed as a cow. She's actually one of the oldest Egyptian gods. Hathor was also considered the goddess who conceived and brought forth life. Egyptians would celebrate her birth at the new year and have drunken orgies in her temple, which is why she's also considered the god of love, as I said. So yeah. So God tells Pharaoh what he's going to do. He does it, and Pharaoh just doesn't listen. This is the cycle we've already seen already with the pool of blood. But the difference with this one is he doesn't call the magicians to come and do their magic and try to kill any cattle or anything. We just see him go tell them to check out Israel, see that Israel has all their stuff, and then he's like, you know what, I'm not going to free the people of Israel because God took away all our cattle, and he doesn't even care. So yeah, I know Bishop's already talked about this cycle that we're going to go through with Pharaoh, but it's very interesting that somebody can tell him, hey, God is going to make this podium float. And then Pharaoh's like, forget it. The podium floats, and he's like, oh no, the podium's floating. Tell God to put the podium down. God puts the podium down. I'm still not letting y'all go though. So it's really interesting to see that fact about Pharaoh and how they portrayed the Egyptian gods and connect them to the Bible. So yeah, by defeating Hathor with all the death of all the cattle, Yahweh proves to be greater than another Egyptian god. Because remember when Moses first comes to Pharaoh and says, hey, Yahweh says to let us go. He's like, who is Yahweh that I should listen to him? Who is Yahweh that he's more powerful than any of the gods that we have? Especially considering that Pharaoh considers himself a god and that he considers himself the morning and evening star. So yeah, it's interesting to see that. We see the cow, Hathor, the goddess of the sky, personified as cattle, being all the cattle in Egypt being killed after Yahweh commands Moses to tell him that. And so it proves that another one of their false idols cannot defeat Yahweh's plan, cannot defeat what Yahweh has planned for them. And so let's take up the tally count. Yahweh's at 5 points right now, and Egyptian gods are at 0. I mean, we all know this. We've seen The Prince of Egypt. If you haven't seen The Prince of Egypt, I encourage you to watch The Prince of Egypt. It's a very great movie. The score's by Hans Zimmerman, but it's not entirely biblically accurate, but it's not entirely biblically off either. So I encourage you to watch it. It's pretty good. So yeah, Yahweh is winning. This is the burning bush. Don't think it's some weird symbolism. It's just the burning bush. I had to search up a picture of it. But yeah, another Egyptian god fallen that cannot beat Yahweh. So let's keep going on through the chapter. So yeah, Pharaoh sees the livestock was protected, and then he's like, forget them. I'm mad about this. God told me that he's going to kill my sheep, my goats, my donkeys, and my cattle, and he's not going to kill Israel's. He does it, and now I'm about to go check and see if God did what he said he's going to do. Then Pharaoh checks, and he sees all their cows, their sheep, their donkeys, and everything, and he's still like, no, I'm not letting them go. And, I believe he talked about how when people ask about the free will and how Pharaoh's heart was hardened and how could God harden his heart? But this chapter actually shows that it's not God who's doing the hardening in Pharaoh's heart. That's why I like this chapter a lot. Because, after this, it says the Lord hardened his heart for the last 2 plagues. But also, it's the descent of Pharaoh's he already had made his decision that he wasn't going to let them go, regardless of what Yahweh does. And so we see that he hardens his heart once again when it comes to the livestock and the protection that God gives to Israel compared to Egypt. Pretty grim stuff here. That Pharaoh, this is economic turmoil, by the way. That's like God saying, every person in Memphis, your bank account is going to be empty tomorrow. But the people of Tabernacle, your bank account's still going to have money. Your cars are still going to work. And then it's happening, and the mayor of Memphis is like, man, forget God. We still going to do what we have to do. It's like, brother, I had $10,000 in my account yesterday, and tonight I have $0 in my account. But they're doing fine. So as an Egyptian, I'd be kind of wary of Pharaoh and his rule. Even his deification as Pharaoh would be called into question. Because usually they see him as this perfect being who's helped to lead our people. But now I'd be like, Pharaoh, we've already had stanky frogs that I had to step on for a few days. I couldn't drink out the river unless I dug a hole next to the river and got water out of it. And now you're telling me my bank account is empty? Imagine the poor people of Egypt. I can't imagine them. It's terrible. You have one sheep to your name, and you're like, all right, I finally just got me a female sheep. I'm going to start producing some more some more sheep for my farm and for my family. And then you go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and your sheep died. You don't know why it's happening. You think there's a punishment from a God, which would you be correct. And some of them probably thought it was one of these Egyptian gods that was causing them problems. But in reality, it was Pharaoh himself causing these problems for everybody. That's terrible. So I said this on my podcast, but I'm gonna say it here too. Be careful who you friends with and who you hang out with, because sometimes the punishment that they're enduring for disobedience to God oftentimes hits you too. The whole land of Egypt was in trouble because of a stubborn Pharaoh who refused to believe in Yahweh. Even after they just took 5 L's. Now, the NBA plays the playoffs. It's 4 out of 7 games to play. That determines the winner. We're at 5 games now, and Pharaoh's still trying to play. It's terrible, terrible. Imagine if you was his right-hand man. How would you feel? But anyway, thank God we serve the living God, Yahweh. But at the same time, these people were going through so much trouble because Pharaoh did not want to listen to God. So let's continue on. Exodus chapter 9, it says it again. It says, and Pharaoh sent, and behold, there was not one of the cattle of the Israelites dead. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. So continuing on, we see in Exodus 9, verse 8 through 12, it says, and the Lord said unto Moses and unto Aaron, take a handful of ashes of the furnace, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh. And it shall become small dust in the land of Egypt, and shall be boil breaking forth with blands upon man and upon beasts throughout all of Egypt, all the land of Egypt. And they took the ashes of the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses sprinkled it up toward heaven, and it became a boil breaking forth with blands upon man and upon beasts. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils was upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not hearken unto them, as the Lord had spoken unto Moses. Terrible stuff here. So now, not only do we not have any more money to our name, we're all basically poor. We're all on a level ground. I guess that's what socialism is, but we're all on level ground now. We all got the same amount of stuff, but now we all sick. And our boils are not a very bad sickness. Their boils are not that bad. I mean, in the sense of you can't do what you have to do. You're going to be able to do what you have to do throughout the day, but you're going to be scratching yourself the whole time doing it. Even though they say you shouldn't scratch. Like when you have a mosquito bite, your mom tells you not to scratch it, but you scratch it anyway and you start bleeding, because who's not going to scratch a mosquito bite when you get a mosquito bite? But yeah, not only are you dealing with that, you're dealing with lack of food, lack of your resources, lack of donkeys, so you don't have your transportation, and now you're itching all the time. Take as many baths as you like, you're not getting rid of this itch. Now, as a normal Egyptian, it's like, man, what's going on? I'm going to the temples of the multiple gods that we serve every day, and I'm making a petition unto heaven, unto the heavens, and nothing's coming my way. But little do you know, the officials in Pharaoh know exactly what's going on, and they're ignoring. So now the God that represents, the God that Yahweh defeats here, the PDF said Isis, but Isis, I did some little more research on it. Isis is not the real God that Yahweh defeats here. It's actually Amin Imhotep, the God of knowledge and medicine, that he actually defeats here. Now, Imhotep was actually a real person who lived as a doctor and as an inventor. He made a pyramid of like 7 steps. It wasn't like the pyramids we see now. It's a different type of pyramid that he helped make. And he also found cures for diseases with natural means. Some people on YouTube claim that he's actually Hippocrates before Hippocrate was Hippocrate. So he's the one that we should be doing an oath after instead of the Hippocratic oath that we do a Hippocratic oath after, that doctors do. I'm not a doctor. So yeah, some people say he should be the one, but you know, and then they go into why it's not him because he's Egyptian and yeah, racism and things of that sort. They start going too deep into things. And then other people, you know, so then he died. He was buried in Memphis, the Memphis of Egypt. And, well, he was born in Memphis too. And then after a while, he becomes a god in the Egyptians' eyes, probably because he was smart. Some people call him a multi-level genius, but he was very smart, and he cured a lot of diseases in his time. So then that's when they called him the God of knowledge and medicine. As you can see, he's sitting with a scroll in his hand. He looks pretty comfortable there. And then I had to search up the least disgusting picture I could find of a boil because, trust me, I went down the rabbit hole and it got very bad. And I was like, Lord, please, give me something that we can use to represent. So I just got this little bump. It's like a mole almost. It was much worse than this. I just didn't want to put that up. We'd have to put on a trigger warning or something before I put that up. So this is the best I can do for a boil. But trust me, they get worse. Some of them spew mucus or pus, and they're very bloody. And now imagine this, but from your toes all the way up. Are you imagining it? Can you feel the itch? And then you have to dress the wounds, you have to clean the wounds, and they're still and they said they were festering boils, by the way, so that means stuff was coming out of them. You know what, let's get off that. Let's get off of that. So, the magicians, here's why the magicians could not stand in front of Pharaoh. They were seen as unclean. Egyptians had high standards of cleanliness. Now, we see this in Genesis 43, verse 32, actually. We see that they abhorred the Jews, actually, which actually paints another layer to Joseph's enslavement in Egypt. So his favor was actually much higher than it was. Think of 1960 Mississippi, colored restrooms and white-only restrooms, or colored fountains and white-only fountains. That's how the Egyptians saw the Jews back in that time. So they did not really like the Jews. They thought that they were like less than. And then we also see that they hated shepherds for the very same reason. So they treated them as less in society. We see that in Genesis 48, verse 34. Joseph devises a plan for his family to get Goshen by telling Pharaoh that they're sheep herders, so that he would be like, you know what, y'all can take that land on the side because we don't want to have to deal with the smell and the look of you. Not only were they already Jews, but that's another reason. So the magicians could not stand before Pharaoh in their unclean state, showing that their magic was useless against Yahweh because they had the boils themselves. And so they couldn't even stand in the presence of Pharaoh because of their unclean state. So now nobody could go to the temple, basically. Nobody could go pray to their gods, not even the priest of that time. Now, interestingly, Pharaoh had the boils himself, but he didn't think himself unclean. But again, that's the deification of Pharaoh that causes him to be that way. So yeah, Pharaoh, their magic was useless against God, so they could not even stand in front of his presence. And so we take the tally mark up to 6 games. God has won to this point. He's up 6. I don't think they're going to come back. Stephen A. might think they have a chance. I don't. It's already 6-0. This is 6 times that God's tried to tell Pharaoh, hey, let my people go so they may worship me. And Pharaoh's still like, man, I'm not listening to you. We got Imhotep, who's the god of medicine and knowledge. We know all we need to know, and we have the medicine to fix everything. But they could not fix these festering boils. Neither could their magicians, who actually really had some good tricks, because they made their staffs into snakes. They actually made some blood inside of a bowl for Pharaoh to see. So they're pretty good. I think they even did I think it's the frogs or the gnats or flies that they reproduce as well. So they had a few tricks up their sleeve, but not all of them was going to work. And God made the distinction here and now. He made them unclean so that they could not even attempt to do what they wanted to do, to try to convince Pharaoh that, hey, we're still 1-1 with God, you know. Our point system is working. So they couldn't even convince Pharaoh at this point. And this is the last time we actually hear of the magicians. They never come back after, where is this? Exodus chapter 9, verse 12. We don't hear about the magicians anymore. I think they realize, you know what, this is crazy. We're not about to deal with this. Pharaoh not about to keep calling us back in here and we're going to get spanked. The tally mark's already 6-0. I'm not about to keep coming back in here getting messed up. Maybe that's what happened. If I was an Egyptian, after the frogs, I'm moving out. It's done. It was already done. I treat it like Sodom and Gomorrah. I know we say we have to be righteous people to stand in the city, but not in Egypt. Stepping on frogs, smelling the smell of dead frogs everywhere you go, yeah, I'd be out. You know, that reminds me of the story. My dad took us fishing when we first came back, 2016. We were living on Grant in Memphis, Shelby Drive, Grand Pines. So we go fishing, and then for some reason we left the worms in the trunk of they were hidden in the trunk somehow. And we were wondering for how long? About a week, maybe 2 weeks. We was wondering, what is this nasty smell we're smelling in this car? And then it was like, okay, we got to do some investigating. So we digging through the back, and we find this dried up cup of worms. So when I read the smell of the frogs, I just think about those worms that I smelled. And if it was that bad in the car, I can't imagine every time you walk outside trying to get some fresh air, you smell worms all around you. That's disgusting. But anyway, I'm going to leave that alone. So yeah, Pharaoh still refuses to listen to God. Now, this time it says that God hardened his heart. But Pharaoh's heart was already hard. He had already claimed that he was going to refuse God anyway. God already told Moses this in chapter 3, that Pharaoh's going to keep refusing, so I'm going to keep sending wonders so that Egypt knows who I am. And it wasn't only for Egypt, because later on in the chapter, really chapter 18, when Jethro comes with Zipporah and Gershom and his other son, I forget his name, it starts with an E, I think I'm not going to try to get it. But when Jethro comes back, he's like, hey, I've heard what God has been doing for y'all. So not only were these plagues important for Pharaoh and Egypt, it was also important for the people surrounding them to understand that Yahweh was real and Yahweh was present and Yahweh was helping Israel. But, later on in the chapter, we see Israel not even believing in Yahweh after all that he does. Not even that far after this happens. So yeah, Pharaoh still refuses. And another interesting thing about Egypt, at this time, because of all the free labor that they had, they were one of the superpowers of the world. So everybody was watching and hearing what's happening in Egypt. Everybody could see the festering boils. Everybody could smell the frogs as the wind blew by. Everybody could see everything that was happening in Egypt. So God using Egypt as the TV show for the rest of the world to see, because of Pharaoh's ignorance and stubbornness, actually helps them out in the long run. And we knew they were going to be enslaved from Genesis 15. God tells Abraham that they're going to get enslaved. So it's not a shock when we come to Exodus and see that they're enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. He tells them this already. So it's interesting to see. Is it a purposeful enslavement? A lot so. It also shows Israel that God is real. Because if you remember, until Genesis 35, Jacob really doesn't serve God. When Jacob first leaves, he hears God at the stairs, and then he lives with Laban. And what happens in Laban's house? It's a lot of craziness. But we do recognize that Laban and his family was serving idols, because when they left, Rachel took Laban's household idol. And then when Laban came back and was mad at Jacob for leaving, and was like, what's good, man? You leaving with my kids and not telling me, because they didn't have FaceTime at the time, or really a mailing system. So he would probably never see them again. We see that. So he's stepping up to Joseph and Jacob. Jacob telling him, let me say goodbye to my family. I could have had you killed for what you did. And then he's like, somebody stole my household idol, and Rachel is in the room sitting down on it, and she's like, I can't get up because I'm on my cycle and I'm unclean at the moment. So that's how we know that that Israel was not serving the God of Yahweh. Even in Genesis 35, when Yahweh tells Jacob to serve him and him alone, and they all have to do the rituals and stuff, after the incident with Dinah and he was afraid, he still kind of doesn't really serve God. You don't hear Jacob praying to God to help him out with when Jacob goes missing. You don't hear him crying out to God with any of that stuff happening. You just hear him crying and mourning his son's death. You don't hear him getting justice for Tamar when Judah does him dirty, because he doesn't even know the laws of God. So these plagues not only make a distinction for Pharaoh and for Egypt and for the rest of the world, is God's trying to let Israel recognize that he's their God, because originally Jacob and his family didn't really recognize God. So you can imagine that Israel probably was serving all these other gods and serving all these other people, serving all this other stuff. And so Yahweh is trying his best to let them know that he's here. And thankfully he has a stubborn person who doesn't want to listen. And so he's allowing him to go on his slide of unforgiveness and his slide of disobedience and pushing him further the way that he wants to go. Because some people try to take the verse where he makes him harden his heart and say, see, God did not give us free will, and it's God who makes us messes us up in our lives. But in reality, we already knew Pharaoh was stubborn. And by God hardening his heart even more, it's just making him go the way that he wants to go. God gives us the desires of our hearts. Pharaoh's desire was not to let Israel go. And so God's like, okay, you don't want to let him go? Let me just roll you down the hill that you're already going down. Because Pharaoh was going to do this anyway. Just like God will help us and encourage us when we have to do the things that we have to do and push us the way that we need to go. The way that you're leaning is the way you're going to fall. And so God's letting Pharaoh fall the way that he wants to go. It's not that he's superimposing against his free will and making him do these things. Pharaoh's doing this to himself. So let's continue on. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had spoken. Let's continue on. It says, okay, I just did that one. Okay. And the Lord hardened not Moses spoken. And the Lord said unto Moses, rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and say unto him, thus saith the Lord, God of the Hebrews, let my people go that they may serve me. For I will at this time send all my plagues upon thy heart and upon thy servants and upon thy people, that thou mayest know that there is none like me in all the earth. As you can see, he's trying to make sure he understands that there's a distinction between him and the idols that they have built up for themselves, of dead men and of things that people came up with their own imaginations. So, for now I will stretch out my hand that I may smite thee and thy people with pestilence, and thou shalt be cut off from the earth. And in very deed for this cause have I raised thee up, for thou show in thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. So yeah, we see God's confirming what I was just telling you about. He wants his name to be heard in all the earth. Everybody's going to know the name of Yahweh by the time I'm done with Egypt. And you find out that they do. So yeah, as ye exalteth thyself against my people, thou wilt not let them go. Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such as hath not been in Egypt since the foundation thereof, even until now. Y'all remember, we've all lived in Mississippi a long time. When they give tornado warnings now, I don't even take them serious sometimes, because it's like, y'all are playing with our lives. Y'all be like, take shelter right now. And then it's like, the wind blows, it rained a little bit, then it disappeared. God's trying to let them know, oh, this one is serious. You're going to have to take cover, and the siren's not going to help you. You better take cover right now. So he says, send therefore now and gather thy cattle. We're going to talk about this. Gather thy cattle, because we just saw at the beginning of the chapter, all the livestock died. So we're going to talk about that in a second. And all that thou hast in the field, for upon every man and beast which shall be found in the field and shall not be brought home, the hail shall come down upon them, and they shall die. So anybody's not found inside of a house is going to be, anybody not in shelter is going to be killed. He that feareth the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his cattle flee into the houses. And he that regarded not the word of the Lord left his servants and his cattle in the field. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch forth thine hand toward heaven, and that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, upon man and upon beast, and upon every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail, and the fire mingled with the hail, very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, and all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail smote every herb of the field, and brake every tree in the field. This was some strong stuff, y'all. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail. So, Here's another, see, this is what I told you. Egypt's gods are pretty weird. Hathor was a goddess of the sky, but there's also Nut. It's not Nut, it's Nut. I was kind of conflicted by it, but it's Nut. She is also a goddess of the sky. Actually, they say her head points towards the east, her legs towards the west, and she's stretched out over the whole land of Egypt. She's the daughter of Shu, god of vital breath, and his wife Tefnut, the goddess of heat. She's usually depicted this way, just stretched out. I know, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, that is a yoga pose. That is a yoga pose too. See, this is what we be trying to tell y'all. But anyway, yeah. So, goddess of the sky, because she's the god of the sky, she has control over all the weather patterns in Egypt. The Egyptians are already dealing with lack of cattle, except for the officials because they got money. But anyway, so they get more cattle, and now there's hail coming down on the earth. Not only hail, but this hail is like friends with fire. They saying it's mingling with fire. They're skipping along. I've never seen this in my life, but it's pretty interesting. So yeah, Nut could not stop the hail in Egypt that Yahweh had sent. She couldn't stop it. So even if somebody was praying to her every day, saying, please, please stop the hail that was coming and stop the fire that's coming through, she couldn't stop it. So the tally count goes up. It's 7-0. It's crazy. And, we don't hear about Pharaoh yet. I cut that part out because I wanted to talk about a few different things. The hail hit everything but the land of Goshen. So now Egypt sees again. None of the Israelites had boils, and they didn't say the work stopped. They didn't say they stopped working the Israelites, but they could tell while they was at work that they weren't having boils. And now the hail's not hitting Egypt. Now, if I'm an Egyptian, it's not hitting Goshen. Now, if I'm an Egyptian, I'm running into Goshen as soon as, but God said everybody who's outside is being killed from the hail. So you really just got to sit in your house and hope for the best, because you're believing in guys that not real, that's bent over, doing yoga poses, and hoping that they'll stop the hail, but it's not happening. So yeah, it hits everything. So now, only in the land of Goshen was there no hail. So now, the question is, because we see at the beginning, God telling the Egyptians, hey, put your stuff up. Put up all your animals, put up your servants. So where did they get the livestock, even though all their livestock died in the earlier chapter? So there's a few things that we can see. First off, we hear that it's Pharaoh and his officials who putting up their livestock and their servants, because not everybody was rich like them. So they probably, they have more than they have. And then you got to think of this. Just like a smart person doesn't put all their money in one bank, or everybody don't put their eggs in the same basket, the officials of Pharaoh and Pharaoh himself could have had sheep and cattle and things outside of the land of Egypt because they were that rich, especially Pharaoh, because at the end of Genesis, we see that Joseph actually gets Pharaoh all of this land surrounding Egypt and all of the cattle and all of their sheep and all of that stuff because people were desperate for grain for food. So by the time we get here, there's no way that Pharaoh could store all of his cattle and sheep in Egypt locally with him. He had to diversify his portfolio or put stuff in different banks. So sure, all your money in, I don't know, what's a local bank? Cadence Bank is gone for Pharaoh. It's like, oh no, I've lost millions of dollars, but I still got millions somewhere else. He probably had some near Chad or all around, and so did his officials. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say all of their cattle was dead. There is actually a very probable reason that they would have more cattle, and that is money. Pharaoh and his officials were very rich. They weren't only rich with cattle, they had a lot of gold and everything. Again, Genesis 49, I believe, 48 it might be. When Joseph is getting all the cattle, first the people give away all their gold, all their silver, all their money. Then they give away all their cattle. Then they give away all their land. So Pharaoh, he's balling off that generational wealth. We hear about that a lot. We got to build generational wealth. Pharaoh had it. So he could buy more livestock. Let's say he got more livestock from the land of Canaan or things like that. Because he's Pharaoh, he can get that pretty quickly. And so could his officials. And the weird thing is, the officials got more just for them to lose it all again for not listening to what Yahweh had just said. That's crazy. And the officials were in the know. They were in the know. They knew what was happening. They knew what was going on. Because we hear later on that they're tired of Pharaoh refusing, and they're like mad at him, like, bro, just let them go. But he still doesn't let them go. So they knew what was going on, and they still disobeyed. So not only did Pharaoh have a hard heart, but also his officials and everybody around him. They were all like, God's Yahweh, who is that? It's a weird name. It starts with a Y. They don't even know who this is. Yahweh, we know Nut, we know Enimhotep, we know Isis, we know Osiris, we know Khonshu, we know Ra. We don't know who Yahweh is. And if we're being quite honest, neither did Israel know who Yahweh was, really. They know that Joseph talked about Yahweh way back 400 years ago. They know that Israel talked about Yahweh, and he was blessed because he followed Yahweh. They knew about Isaac walking with Yahweh. Even though Isaac has a little bit in Genesis, Isaac's life was pretty significant. He showed endurance. He showed perseverance. They know about him. They know about Abraham's covenant with Yahweh and how he was promised a great nation through Yahweh. But the common Israelite did not know who Yahweh was. If I was an Israelite in that time, first off, you're born. If I didn't die with the kids at first, if I wasn't one of the kids that got killed and I was born and I made it, I don't think I would know who Yahweh was either. I've been working this whole time, slaving, pushing stuff, making bricks, and then this dude named Moses came, and now I got to gather my own straw to make the bricks. They was giving us the straw. So now I got to keep the same quota of bricks that I've been doing while mixing it for myself and getting the straw for myself. So now the supply is low, demand is high. Who is Yahweh? And notice when Moses first comes, he talks to the elders with Aaron. Even though Moses was 83 years old, you'd think he was an elder of Israel. But no, he talks to the elders of Israel. So, nobody really knows who Yahweh is. They just see this man, Moses, with a stick, letting Aaron do miracles for him because he was too scared to talk for himself and convince God to make Aaron do the miracles for him in some instances. Yeah, they don't know who he is. So this is another way to distinct and let them know. And you can see if Pharaoh's officials didn't take him serious, of course, Israel's probably not taking him serious. They're still working. Matter of fact, ever since Moses came, we've been working much harder than we started. That's like, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. I will use Amazon, because Amazon folks say it's like slavery up in there. You working crazy. You can't sit down on your shift, and I think you get a 5-minute bathroom break your whole 12-hour shift or something like that. So yeah, they say it's slavery in there, but the check be good, but the check hit, but your feet gonna hurt. I think you get an hour break, but you got to work 11 hours. And you're just moving boxes the whole time. But anyway, so let's use that. So I come into Amazon, and I'm like, yo, Jeff Bezos, God said, let his people go. Jeff is like, you know what? I was giving them boxes to pack the stuff in. Now I'm not even going to give them boxes. They got to go to Office Depot, use their check, and buy the boxes to ship the stuff in. You think I'm going to be their best friend? Vote me for Congress? No, I don't think so. And that's what discouraged Moses in the first place. So now we see the fire mingling with the hail, like they're going hand in hand, like boyfriend and girlfriend, like they've been married for a long time. But we know, we've seen it ourselves. Fire does not grow near hail. Fire does not even, are not even close to hail. Now I was looking at this. KJV says mingled with fire. I think it's HCSB in different versions say lightning, and other versions say hail with fire. Even the Prince of Egypt, they made the hail balls be lit on fire. So it's like, which one is it? Well, this is weird, We have all these different explanations. Here's a few things we do know. It says it here. So there was hail, Exodus 9 verse 24 says, so there was hail and fire mingled with the hail. That's mingled. There's a dating app called Christian Mingle. So that's why I assume they was holding hands walking together, They was mingling. So they was such that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. So it's like, this is weird. Fire mingling with it. So now, you would think, maybe it's the translation. Some people say lightning, but we have two different verses. Here's HCSB. It says lightning here. It says the hail with lightning flashing through it. So this one is even more interesting. It's saying the hail's falling and lightning's going through it. That's weird. Either way, we know something weird was happening. I'm just going to put that out there. Something weird happening. But, it says lightning here, but there's different versions saying different things. Some accompanied with fire, some mingling with fire, some with lightning going through it, some just plain lightning. So I took up these two verses. These are in KJV too, where one of them talks about Sodom and Gomorrah when God rained fire and brimstone out of heaven. And this one talks about Exodus 20, when the Ten Commandments came, people saw thunder and lightnings and the noise of a trumpet. So we know that the writer of Genesis and Exodus knows the difference between fire and lightning. So is this some cosmic phenomenon? Possibly. But, I did a little bit more digging. And so we know the writer knows the difference, but I did a little more digging because, it's weird. It says the crops were destroyed by the hail and, everything was destroyed. There's fire, there's hail. So I knew I had seen some before. We had a tree at our house, our old house, got struck by lightning before, and it was on fire, even though it was raining outside. So here's a few. You can Google these. These are on the news. There's a few different news stories about them. This tree was struck by lightning. That one was struck by lightning. And all of these, as you can see, the ground is even wet on this one. So it is possible for fire and water to go hand in hand sometimes. And in this case, and because, Yahweh is who he is, he can make whatever he wants to happen. But, we can do a little bit of scientific explanations for things for people who doubt Yahweh's power anyway. It's really interesting how people be like, well, there's an all-knowing, you say there's an all-knowing, all-powerful God. How did he create earth? Did you not hear me say he's all-knowing and all-powerful? But anyway, so here's my theory. It was lightning. Y'all don't have to take my theory. It was lightning. And the hail, God made sure the hail did not make the ground and things wet. It was just straight ice that wasn't melting and making the ground wet. So that's how the crops were getting burned up, and that's how the trees were on fire. But we know that trees, like I said, we know that trees can be on fire while it's raining anyway. It's really, you don't want to hear it happen, you don't want to see it happen. But after it happens and you go look at it, the tree's alive on the outside, but it's being consumed by fire on the inside. And if you see this live, you understand why people call it consuming fire. And then the National Weather Service says that lightning actually causes a lot of forest fires, because think in Texas and different places, sometimes you're hit with a thunderstorm, no rain falls, it's just lightning the whole time. And so it's very probable that it was hail falling and it was lightning everywhere and it was causing fires around. And that's why they were saying the hail was mingling with the fire, because as it was falling, the crops was burning. As it was falling, this tree was getting tore down. So, sometimes people be like, these things, the Bible talks about these impossibilities and these improbabilities. And it's like, it's really connecting with the scientific data that we have. Because even in a really crazy thunderstorm, lightning hits, you're going to see a fire. Trees explode. It's crazy. I'm telling you, you don't want to hear it. You don't want to see it happen, but the aftermath is pretty awesome to look at. It's like, my God, this is 20 feet away from the tree and it exploded. So yeah, it's highly possible that this happened. Again, these pictures, this was a tree, I think it's in Texas, but look how big this oak is, and it got struck and it's on fire and it's heating up. And then you got to think, when the tree falls, it's still on fire, could catch the crops on fire. So a few different theories. God could have kept the crops dry that he wanted to kill, made sure that when the fire hit him, the fire kept going. There could have been lightning going through the hail, and when it landed, lightning struck everywhere. Or it could just be the hail was on fire and it was burning everything up. Either way, we know that stuff was cooking and stuff was getting destroyed. And then you got to consider, nobody could go outside to really check, because anybody who went outside was going to get killed. So really, folks was looking through their window like, oh my goodness. It was fire mingling with the hail. I don't even know how to explain it. So yeah, it's different things like that could have happened. Because I know if I was there, I wouldn't be the one to walk outside and say, yeah, y'all, I think it's lightning coming out of, it wouldn't be me. I'd pay somebody to go out there. I'd give you one of my sheep. Go ahead, go check. No, yeah. So yeah, at least they listened to that. So yeah, again, the writer, Moses knew, and Moses is presumed to be the writer of the Pentateuch. So he wrote mingling with fire, and it's been translated different ways. Just know that there was fire and there was hail. And there was more than likely lightning, because when it's raining and it's hailing, there's lightning all the time. And this is what happens when lightning strikes stuff. And the Bible says that the trees and the crops were being destroyed. So it was highly probable that the hail was breaking the trees, lightning was striking and burning these trees, the crops were being hit by hail and being burned all at the same time. And it's like, my goodness, this mingling with fire. I never thought I'd see the union, this forbidden union of fire and water. But again, Egypt and their gods could not do this. Nut could not have done this. They've been worshiping Nut for a long time. Hathor, the goddess of love, who's also, like I said, a sky god. So they have multiple different sky gods. And Hathor is said to have 4 pillars to holding up the sky. And then there's a god like they call him Atlas in Greek mythology, who's actually holding up the heavens. It's a lot of weird stuff going on. It's like, is Hathor holding up the heavens? Is Set doing it? So yeah, Egypt had a lot of different confusing mixing of gods here. So Nut is a sky god and Hathor is a sky god. So really we could say that God beat 2 at the same time. That would make it like 8 points for God. But I just put 7 up there to be fair to Egypt. They're already getting spanked. We don't need them to get whooped really completely. So yeah, God uses this weird union. I don't think you ever see fire and water coexist this well. Fire, ice, and water coexisting in a way to destroy everything. If you do see it, let me know. If you say that there was fire on top of some water, that's oil on top of the water being burnt. But I don't think we'll ever see this again, because next time he's doing what he did to Sodom and Gomorrah, fire and brimstone. There's going to be no hell. So yeah, lightning may have caused the fire. And Yahweh allowed the fire to grow in the midst of a hailstorm. And then you got to remember, with storm, I used to watch the weather. I used to watch a weather channel a lot, so I know about these storms and the fires. Forest fires, the biggest spreader of forest fires is wind. And it's crazy. They say this fire can start over here, and if the wind's blowing strong enough, it can get over here in like 20 seconds. And it's crazy. So if it's a storm, there's wind going everywhere. So the crops easily destroyed. The crops, everything easily destroyed. Everything easily burned up. So it's not only hail crushing things, it's not only lightning starting fires, but it's fires growing because of the wind. So yeah, don't get confused in your Bible too quick. Sometimes I get confused in my Bible too quick. Then I'm like, Lord, thank you for revealing this to me. And then on other things, the mysteries of God may never be revealed. And we just have to trust Yahweh for who he is. Yahweh Nisi, the provider. So yeah. Here's the last part of this chapter, actually. Verse 27 through 35. And Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and Aaron and said unto them, I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. Notice this. Aaron and Moses make it into the city. It didn't say the hail stopped yet. So they make it into the city untouched, even though nobody can go outside. Maybe and the servant that he sent makes it, because God knows the servant's got to go tell him. They didn't have phones. They weren't like, Moses, come over here right now. No, he had to send somebody. So now Moses makes it, and now it's like, wow, they made it here untouched, unscathed, unburned by the fire mingling with hail. So your people are righteous. Entreat the Lord, for it is enough that there be no more mighty thunderings and hail, and I will let you go, and ye shall no longer stay. Again, it says thunderings here. It said fire mingling with hail, but now it says thunderings here. So it may have been lightning mingling with it. So, and then it says, and Moses said unto him, as soon as I am gone out of the city, I will spread abroad my hands unto the Lord, and the thunder shall cease. Neither shall there be any more hail, that thou mayest know that the earth is the Lord's. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. He was quoting scripture that he didn't even know yet. But as for thee and thy servants, I know that ye will not yet fear the Lord God. And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was bold. I don't know what in the ear means. I'm sorry. But I'm sorry, I know what it means. It was ripe. I'm sorry, it was in the ear. Just like an ear of corn, it was ripe. I apologize. I did know what it meant. I was just being, sometimes your mind goes different places. And the flax was already ready. They were both ripe. So here's another sign of economic turmoil. So these farmers spent the whole season, because after Genesis chapter 3, the man had to toil for his fruit and labor. So these farmers spent this whole time getting the barley and the flax ready just for it to be destroyed. In the ripe season, harvest day was coming up. Harvest moon was about to happen, and they was going to start celebrating and eating this food, but now it's gone. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. And now we see some of the mercy of God right here. See, God destroyed a lot of their economic stuff, but he left them with something to eat, you know? He left them with wheat and rye. Now, have you ever had rye bread? It's kind of crunchy, and that's how it is straight off. You didn't toast it or anything. It's just soft and chewy and crunchy at the same time. I couldn't get into it. If anybody likes rye bread, God bless you, but it's not for me. So yeah, so we see God's mercy for Egypt, even in the midst of his discipline and correction. He leaves them the wheat and the rye, for it was not grown up yet. So they're going to survive for a little while before the rye and the wheat are ripened, but they should be all right. And Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread abroad his hands unto the Lord, and the thunders and hail ceased, and the rain was not poured upon the earth. And when Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunders were ceased, he sinned yet more and hardened his heart, he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, neither would he let the children of Israel go, as the Lord has spoken by Moses. Pharaoh, I tell you what, if I saw hail mingling with fire, really, like I said, the frogs was going to be the last resort for me. It was going to be like, this was nasty. Not only was this the second stenching, the first stench was the blood in the river. It was real blood. They could smell that. Then it was the frogs. I would have been done after the frogs. But Pharaoh, you got to give him something. He's got some persistence. He's a liar. He's a bad leader, but he's got some persistence. He's still sacrificing his whole people because he doesn't want to let them go. After he saw that the rain and the hail and thunders were ceased, he sinned yet again. So Pharaoh was a bad leader. I think this is obvious by now. We're at 7 plagues. Pharaoh's still doing what he does best, lying to Moses. Egypt sees Moses as a God figure and Aaron as his prophet, just as God said that they would, because every time Moses comes and does what he does, something happens to Egypt. So Egypt's not looking at Yahweh. They're looking at Moses, who's pointing them to Yahweh. Pharaoh's not listening. He claimed, he said he had sinned, that please stop this. And then after there's relief, he is, just who he is, stubborn. So he was a bad leader. In the midst of rain, all the rain and turmoil, unrest in the nation, he continually refuses to acknowledge Yahweh and obey his commands. Now, the question for us is, do we listen to God when he requests something from us? Because we can look at Pharaoh and say, he's stupid. He sees all these miracles of heaven. God's trying to compel him to do the right thing and turning his head and let him see what happens when he doesn't do the right thing. And he's rejecting God. But we do the same thing a lot. I'll speak for myself. I do the same thing a lot. So, yeah, we see, with me, it's like, are you going to eat that extra plate at Rebel Market? Because as a college student, I have a rule. I eat once a day. That's lunchtime, and I eat heavy. I'm again, give me 5 plates, please. I don't have time to cook when I get home. I got homework to do. And after being at school all day, you're tired. But sometimes God's like, you eating too much, brother. You need to calm down. I'm like, God, I'm starving. Let me just have this one thing. Let me just get one more plate. And then after the last plate, I'm like, let me just have this one more thing. Let me get some ice cream and some cake. Because ice cream on top of that cake, I'm telling you. And they have this vegan cake. I never thought I would say it, but vegan strawberry cake is one of the greatest cakes you will ever eat in your life. But guess what? I'm just like Pharaoh in that moment. The consequence comes because I have a class right after that. And I'm like, and the dude, he talks like this. And so permutations, we have to do this and that. And I'm like, Jesus, please spare me the pain. The first time I did it, I was fighting for my life. I've learned my lesson now. I don't do it no more, But, God sends us a punishment for our disobedience. And so sometimes we wonder why life is hard, but we know why life is hard, really. We want to live in disobedience. And God is very merciful, just like he is with Pharaoh. He gives him a chance. He keeps pausing. He's like, do you give up yet? And he's like, nah. And then he goes back to doing what he's doing. It's like brother siblings wrestling. I'm not calling Pharaoh God's sibling in any way or form, but I know this as an older brother and as a younger brother, because I'm an older and a younger. Wrestling matches. So you fighting your sibling. It's going fine, right? You're juking the punches. You got them in a lock. And then they get you into something that you can't get out. And you like, man, let me go. I'm done. They let you go, and guess what? You go right back into it. My mom didn't like us fighting. She didn't like us fighting at all. But we brothers, we gonna do it. She still don't like us fighting, even though we just be playing. We just be wrestling. It's siblings. Like I said, I'm the strongest out here. I'm the heaviest of my siblings. So I am and I'm the strongest one out of them. They can't beat me at all. He not in here, but I tell him after service. So yeah, it's just like that. It's really just like that. God keeps putting Pharaoh in a lock where he can't get out. And he's like, okay, I'm going to listen this time. Once he lets him go, he goes right back to doing what he was doing, trying to fight God. Or with parents, My parents told me not to do certain things, and I still did it. And I think my dad has this very specific nose. I don't know what it is, but he's got like a bloodhound's nose almost. So he tells us not to play with matches. You know where this is going. But anyway, he tells us not to play with matches. I understand why he said that now. But back in the day, fire is fascinating. It's very fascinating. I'm not a pyromaniac or anything. I made sure I had control of the fire. But he tells us not to mess with fire. And, one day I light a match. I'm just like, let me light this match. Take it out. He's not home. 3 hours go by. 3 whole hours. So, the smell shouldn't even be in the house anymore. He walks in, let me act like I have the key. He comes in the house. Hey, Dad, how you doing? Who was lighting matches? Now, at this point, I'm compelled to lie because I'm afraid of the consequence of my action that I knew not to take. And I'm like, in this moment is where you become a man or you become a coward. And I'm thinking to myself, do I lie and get away with this for now? Because he will line us all up and start whooping one by one until somebody confess. So, sure, I'll get off for about 30 minutes maybe 45 possibly. How many whoopings can I endure before I fess up? Or do I tell the truth? In which case, I still get whooped. Yeah, so I told the truth, points to character for telling the truth. But, let's just say I was sleeping like Newt was that night because I couldn't roll over that night. Sitting on the toilet never felt so struck. I had to, you can't do what you wanted to do. And then the worst part is he makes you sit at the dinner table after the whooping to eat with the family because we're a family, we're going to be together. So you're sitting there with your hand holding you up, trying to eat your plate at the same time, and he's acting like nothing's happening. You're like, I know what you did. You know what you did. Everybody at this table heard it. And they're going to act like nothing's happened. Pray for me, y'all. We still working out the kinks of that. Really, I'm just playing. No. But yeah, so that's what's happening with Pharaoh here. Again, think of the consequences that you have for certain actions. I know we live in a new generation. Our kids don't get whooped like they used to, but there's no kids in here. We all older. So yeah, think of the times that you got whooped for something that you knew you got whooped for and how the consequence came to the action that you took immediately. And then, some of my siblings were more stubborn than I was. They still kept doing stuff. I kind of learned certain things I learned my lesson the first time. Fighting wasn't one of them, but certain things I learned my lesson the first time. So yeah, another question for you. So, I went back. So it's way easy to judge Pharaoh for him doing that in the midst of all the wonders. But we come to Tabernacle every Sunday. We see different miracles happen in our lives. We pray for things, God gives them to us, and we still go back and do the things that we know we're not supposed to do. We still go disobey God. So yeah, look in your own life. I'm not going to judge you. I'm judging myself right now. Look at the things that you're doing, and you're wondering why things are not working out for you. But the real reason is because you're acting like Pharaoh. You're being stubborn, disobedient, going your own way. And then some of you are like, I'm not being disobedient, but life is still hard. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So, yeah, that's what it is. We got to continually obey God and do what he calls us to do. Difficult, but we got to do it, I'm scared. My deepest fear is that I'm going to finish college, all this hard work of being poor and not having money. I'm going to get a good paying job, right? And God's going to be like, yo, I want you to leave and go live in Antarctica by yourself in a tent. But God, I just did all this work getting my degree, Who am I going to be preaching to in Antarctica, There's one guy there that I need you to preach to, and it's going to take like 10, 20 years for you to preach to him, but eventually he's going to come to the Lord, and I need you to do that. That's my deepest fear. One day I'm going to just know that he's telling me I got to go to Antarctica. And I'm going to come in like, well, y'all, the tithe is going to stop coming in because I got to go to Antarctica. I don't know why it's a fear. Pray for me. Obedience to God is difficult sometimes. We see this with Jonah. Jonah is just like Pharaoh in a way because he disobeys God. And the reason that Jonah disobeys God is not because he's afraid of Nineveh. It's because he hates Ninevites. And what does God do? Swallows him in the well, and then he's like, man, I messed up. I realized it really stank in here, God. Please forgive me for what I've done and help me to do what you want me to do. And then he goes and does it reluctantly and only tells him once, and God moves in a great way. So, yeah, what is God calling you to do that you're running away from? Anybody called to fast for 30 days? Let me not raise my hand because I'm not called. I have strawberry vegan cake to be eaten on next week, Tuesday. I'm planning the date. I can see it happening right now. I'm pulling the piece out. I'm putting the ice cream on top of it. I'm cutting it out and I'm eating it. But is God calling any of you to fast? Is God calling any of you to do something that he's been putting on your heart for a while, and you're wondering why it's so hard to do things that you usually do, or, it's so hard to do certain things because you're not listening to what God's been calling you to do. So I compel you, listen to what God's calling you to do because he's calling us all to do something. And sometimes we can tell why our life is going difficult, and we be in our prayer closets crying, Lord, I don't know why life is so hard. Satan is on my track. I just can't do it. And God's like, now you know that I told you 6 months ago that you need to get rid of that pair of shoes. If it's that easy for y'all, I pray that it is. Put them in the clothes closet. But no, God calls us to do things, and the difficulties come in our life because of it. Notice Pharaoh's had 7 difficulties, and some of us, we can see the difficulties that we've been having multiple times because of the things that we have rejected to do that God's called us to do. So yeah, that's really weird. Oh, that's in